Ivy Snow adjusted the brim of her worn cap as she swept the edge of the theater's manicured flower beds beneath the flickering street lamps. The cold night air brushed against her cheeks, a quiet contrast to the warm buzz inside the grand downtown theater where the premiere was unfolding. The marquee glowed in golden letters, announcing the film with a promise of stars and spectacle fitting every inch of the luxurious building. She wore plain work clothes, faded jeans and a modest jacket that had seen better days, and kept to the shadowy paths between guests arriving in shimmering gowns and crisp tuxedos. Ivy's hands were rough from years of labor, her voice carrying a rich accent from a small rural town. But here, surrounded by such elegance, she felt invisible. A waiter sneered as he passed by, whispering to a companion, "Looks like the cleaning crew's lost someone." Another guest, catching her accent, mockingly asked if she'd understood a word of the speeches blaring from the grand hall. Inside, laughter and champagne bubbles met orchestral music, and glittering conversations floated through the high-ceilinged space. The air grew thick with perfume and expectation until a sudden stir began near the restrooms. A young usher's voice broke the evening's harmony. "Someone's down," he said, eyes wide. "It's the lead actor. He's unconscious in the bathroom." Guests near the doorway exchanged confused glances. Murmurs turned to gasps. A ripple of tension spread, the glamorous evening abruptly cracked by an unexpected emergency. People hesitated, unsure how to respond. The flowery chatter ceased, replaced by whispers of alarm. Through the throng, Ivy paused, sensing something urgent. With a quiet breath, she stepped forward towards the closed bathroom door. The murmurs swelled into a blend of frantic voices, like an unseen tide pushing through the grand hallway. Guests shuffled awkwardly, some clutching fluted glasses of champagne as if they could anchor themselves to normalcy. The elaborate chandeliers overhead twinkled, casting fragmented light that made the panic feel both immediate and surreal. There was no clear leader amid the confusion. The theater staff hesitated, their practiced smiles replaced by blank stares. Ivy stepped forward, her footsteps steady on polished marble. An older woman in a glittering gown glanced down at Ivy's plain work jacket and shook her head, whispering, "This isn't your place." A young man wearing a sharply tailored suit tried to block her path, voice clipped and commanding. "You should step back, ma'am. The paramedics will handle it." But Ivy's hands twisted the rag in her pocket. "I'm a trained EMT," she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. "Please, let me in. We need to help him now." Her accent, usually mocked, sounded grave and unyielding in the charged atmosphere. The man hesitated, exchanging uneasy looks with others. The cluster of guests around them was now pressing against the bathroom door, the flat panel rattling every few seconds as muffled sounds passed through. The lead actor's shallow, uneven breathing seeped out, faint but unmistakable. A whisper rose, then spread like wildfire. "She's a groundskeeper." "What does she know?" Some scoffed quietly, doubt and surprise tangled in their tones. Ivy ignored the noise. With a brief nod from the theater manager, a woman who looked torn between propriety and urgency, she slipped past the barrier. The heavy door clicked shut behind her. Inside, the air was stifling. The bathroom's marble tiles radiated the heat trapped within, thick with the faint scent of expensive soap and the faint metallic tang that usually went unnoticed. The lead actor lay slumped against the wall, his face pale and slick with sweat. His dark hair clung to his forehead in damp strands. Ivy's eyes inspected him calmly, his pulse was rapid but weak, his skin clammy to the touch. She checked his airway with trained fingers and noted the shallow rise of his chest. A faint creak in the ventilation hinted at poor airflow in the cramped room. "Heat exhaustion," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Quickly, Ivy set to work. Her hands moved with a precision born of countless emergencies, not out of heroics, but routine. She loosened the collar of his designer shirt, pulling gently but deliberately. She signaled toward the small sink and grabbed the cool water basin. A nearby theater attendant, eyes wide, watched as Ivy dipped a cloth and carefully dabbed the actor's forehead and neck. "Can someone call emergency services?" Ivy instructed, voice calm but insistent. A young bartender nearby fumbled with a smartphone, fingers trembling. "I've got it," he said, pressing the call button. Ivy directed him to stay on the line, then turned back to the actor. She raised his legs slightly, propping his feet on the edge of the sink cabinet to encourage blood flow to his vital organs. "Keep people back," she said. "He needs air. And quiet." Her tone left no room for argument. Voices pressed against the door, but the crowd had fallen silent, the earlier chatter replaced by a tense hush. Eyes now focused on the open bathroom door, curiosity mixed with wonder. Minutes ticked by, the pace both urgent and measured. Ivy gently encouraged a nearby security guard to open a side window further, allowing cooler air to circulate into the tiny room. She explained, "This will help lower his body temperature. Keep him calm and still until paramedics arrive." As she continued, Ivy's face remained a mask of concentration, but inwardly, she felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline tempered by years of experience. Her breath was steady, matching the rhythm she coaxed from the actor's faltering chest. Outside, the guests shifted, some lowering their phones, caught between disbelief and growing respect. The older woman who had initially dismissed Ivy crossed her arms, then slowly nodded to herself. The young man who had blocked Ivy's path now watched with a mixture of humility and surprise. Through the bathroom door came the distant but unmistakable wail of sirens. Ivy glanced toward the window, then back to the actor, who was starting to show signs of improvement, a faint blush returning to his cheeks, slow but steady breaths. The crisis was stabilizing. When the paramedics finally arrived, Ivy stepped aside effortlessly, relaying the key points with a succinct professionalism that silenced the buzzing room. The lead paramedic nodded, impressed by the woman in plain clothes who had held the moment together. As the actor was carefully moved onto a stretcher, Ivy caught the eyes of a few onlookers pressed against the doorframe. She saw their expressions shift, the idle mockery now replaced by acknowledgement. Some whispered the word "hero," others nodded with quiet gratitude. In the soft glow of the exit signs, Ivy straightened her jacket and stepped back into the corridor. The grand hall beyond was beginning to stir again as whispers turned into murmurs of admiration, seeping through the party like a new thread weaving its way through the fabric. For a moment, the glow of the chandeliers didn't just light the faces of the elite, it caught the simple figure of Ivy Snow in its broad, unblinking beams. The groundskeeper who had stepped forward when silence and doubt reigned. The woman who, for a brief shining hour, refused to be invisible. The day Ivy Snow chose to walk down the winding path to the city's emergency medical training center was not so different from tonight, cool, with a gentle breeze swirling fallen leaves along cracked sidewalks. Years ago, this place had been a crucible of determination, hope, and skill for her. She remembered those days with a bittersweet clarity that both warmed and ached in her chest. She had been young, a sharp-eyed woman with a quick mind and an unyielding will to help. Her uniform was crisp, the blue fabric freshly pressed, and her black boots polished to a shine. The badge pinned on her chest was more than a symbol, it was a promise to herself and every person she might aid in a moment of crisis. Every day during her EMT training, Ivy relished the intense rhythm of life and death. She absorbed lectures on anatomy, emergency procedures, and the emotional resilience required to face the worst. Field exercises in the heart of the city's chaos forged a sense of purpose that pulsed deep through her veins. She recollected the sound of screaming sirens and the rush of adrenaline as she and her team responded to car accidents, heart attacks, and sudden trauma. There was one moment etched into her memory, a winter night, when a young child trapped in a burning house was saved by her calm hands, steady voice, and precise care. Afterwards, the child's mother had wept quietly, clutching Ivy's hands, whispering endless thanks. That sense of saving someone, of being needed, fueled her drive. Yet life rarely followed a single path. Her memories darkened to a period when the demands of her job collided with the relentless weight of personal trials. Her son, Adam, was born with a fragile heart and recurring health complications. The frequent hospital visits, the sleepless nights, the mounting bills, each chipped away at Ivy's strength. When Adam fell seriously ill with a respiratory infection one harsh winter, the strain was too much. Ivy made the painful decision to leave her paramedic role to care for him full-time. The transition was wrenching. The city's frantic energy gave way to the quiet hum of small apartments and shadowed hospital wards. Ivy, once surrounded by doctors and first responders, slipped into a series of low-wage jobs to keep food on the table, retail, cleaning, and ultimately the groundskeeper role at the downtown theater. She often worked late into the night, hidden beneath layers of dirt and park leaves, swapping her EMT vest for a worn jacket. The rich world of emergency care felt distant, and with every passing season, her hope for returning seemed to dim. Still, in those quiet months, Ivy never lost the readiness to act. Her hands, memory, and heart stayed attuned to emergencies, ready to leap forward at a moment's notice. She would check her son's vitals before dawn, administer nebulizer treatments, and keep a vigilant watch through cold nights. Once she'd nearly prevented a choking incident at a grocery store, her calm intervention unnoticed by anyone but the relieved mother she helped. But no one asked who she was or the depth of skill beneath her humble exterior. The city moved fast and indifferent. The years reflected in the cracked mirror of her small apartment told a story of sacrifice and silent strength. Ivy often found herself staring at the faded certificates framed on her modest wall, the EMT certification that had opened doors, the first aid awards, the handwritten notes of praise from trainers. They were relics of a life paused, dormant yet burning quietly beneath the surface. She recalled evenings when exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, and loneliness pressed close. The theater groundskeeper job was not glamorous, and she lacked the people and camaraderie she once drew strength from. Yet Ivy found satisfaction in the rhythm of tending the grounds, the steady brush strokes clearing leaves, the careful pruning of flowers, and in doing small things well. That night at the premiere wasn't just a chance. It was the moment years of quiet waiting and hidden expertise converged. When Ivy saw the lead actor collapse, her instincts surged forward, not as a gesture of bravery, but as an echo of identity she had never fully lost. She remembered being pushed aside during that emergency, the disbelief in some eyes when she insisted on helping. The old question, "What do you know?" still rung faintly in her ears, but she only smiled inwardly at irony. Years of training and hard-earned experience weren't defined by uniforms or titles, but by actions. Ivy saw in the actor's pale face a reflection of fragility she knew well, a reminder that no matter social status or wealth, human bodies shared vulnerabilities. She applied her knowledge with quiet determination, steady hands steadying a fleeting life in the midst of celebration. The world she'd once inhabited, the circle of medics, nurses, and first responders, felt distant but not forgotten. She had been removed through circumstance, not choice. The profound regret she carried was mingled with fierce devotion to her son, whose fragile health had altered the course of their lives. In the months since taking the groundskeeper job, Ivy had watched the theater's glittering guests with a complicated mixture of longing and self-protection. They represented a life she once dreamed of reclaiming, though she believed it had slipped through her fingers. Still, deep down, her competence never waned. Tonight, standing on polished marble in a shining hall bursting with voices and music, she had stepped into the light once more, quietly unsettling the expectations of those who dismissed her. She had not saved a stranger by chance. She had done what she had always known how to do, and what a mother's heart demanded: to protect, to act, to hold steady when the world shook. As Ivy glanced into the ornate mirrors of the theater's grand foyer after tending to the actor, she saw a woman who was more than groundskeeper, more than invisible onlooker. She was a keeper of life, a bearer of calm in moments of chaos, a silent guardian whose strength, though hidden beneath plain clothes, endured. The memory of those days at the emergency training center, the long nights, the whispered thanks, and the hard choices shaped her. And tonight, Ivy Snow had reclaimed a piece of the courage she thought she had lost. The evening air outside the Grand Theater was heavy with a newfound hum, a subtle shift in mood from the glittering chaos a few hours earlier. As Ivy Snow stood near a shining brass railing, the crowd now seemed to orbit her with something other than indifference. She felt eyes, once averted or dismissive, tracking her every move, some with surprise, others with respect. "Ivy," a voice called almost hesitatingly. It was Martin, the theater's head usher, a man known for his exacting demeanor and rigid protocols. He approached with a tentative smile and an outstretched hand. "Thank you. We didn't know what to do." "You saved him." Ivy's weathered hands shook slightly but accepted the handshake, offering a modest nod. "It was nothing," she said softly, though the quiet pride beneath the words was unmistakable. Word had already begun weaving its way through the theater staff. The catering team clustered around the kitchen doors, whispering excitedly about the groundskeeper turned savior. The usually aloof bartenders exchanged glances, some nodding with quiet approval. Even the VIP attendants, known for their icy glances, found themselves lingering near Ivy, offering small smiles or brief acknowledgments where before there had been avoidance. Outside, the guests had begun to disperse, their chatter veering between astonishment and admiration. Smartphones emerged from pockets and evening bags, phones recording and replaying the scene of Ivy's calm handling of the crisis, captured by quick-thinking onlookers. A young woman in an elegant emerald gown, her eyes shimmering with tears, approached Ivy near the velvet rope. Her voice trembled. "I just want to say thank you. You were brave. I don't think many people would have done what you did. The way you stayed so calm, it was incredible." Ivy managed a faint smile, the weight of the moment touching her unexpectedly. "I did what I could," she replied, feeling a surge of warmth from the genuine gratitude. Meanwhile, social media accounts instantly erupted. Videos of Ivy gently dabbing the lead actor's brow, her steady hands loosening his collar, circulated rapidly across platforms. The hashtag #groundskeeperhero trended locally, generating comments from celebrities, journalists, and fans alike. One prominent film critic posted a heartfelt message: "Tonight, among the glitter and glamour, it was quiet courage that stole the show." Ivy Snow reminds us that heroes don't wear velvet gowns or sit in front rows. They act with heart when it matters most. The local news stations caught wind quickly. A tearful interview with one of the premiere's prominent guests surfaced, the individual describing Ivy as a reminder of humanity beyond the spotlight. The actor's early recovery was attributed, in part, to her timely action. Backstage, the groundskeeper's usual realm of solitude shifted unexpectedly. Ivy's co-workers, who had barely acknowledged her presence in past days, now asked how she was feeling, if she needed anything. They offered compliments that felt awkward but sincere. Even the young woman who had previously laughed behind her back approached with a shy, respectful tone. The most startling change was how guests, previously aloof or dismissive, greeted Ivy with nods and greetings resembling those shared among equals. A few even paused for quick photos with her, eager to capture the moment with the unexpected star of the evening. As the night unfolded, Ivisa's name began to surface across various online forums and community pages. Hidden fragments of her history appeared, images of a younger Ivy in a crisp paramedic uniform, headlines from earlier in her career spotlighting her dedication and skill, and testimonials from grateful patients she had once helped. This newfound recognition was tempered by a poignant thread of admiration mixed with empathy. Many comments reflected acknowledgement of the sacrifices she had made, her quiet resilience amid personal struggles. Threads discussed how Ivy had quietly stepped back into her calling, if only for a moment, and how much strength it required to live humbly while carrying such a capacity for greatness inside. For Ivy, the flood of attention brought complex feelings. She found herself navigating a world that had always felt just beyond her reach, the world of respect, acknowledgement, and possibility. The invisible barrier that had defined her work life cracked, letting in a sliver of light that sparkled with unexpected promise. Yet, amid the cheers and social media buzz, Ivy remained grounded. She returned to her duties with quiet dignity, mindful of the fact that her life wasn't defined by a single night. While she accepted the accolades, she also carried the familiar humility that had sustained her through long years of sacrifice. As dawn touched the city, casting soft hues over the theater's towering facade, Ivy stood alone for a moment, breathing deeply. The world had shifted. She had stepped into the light, and people had finally seen her. The ordinary woman, the groundskeeper with a regional accent and simple clothes, was now recognized as someone extraordinary. A woman who, by acting with calm and skill, had reminded everyone that strength and courage thrive in unexpected places. The city's early morning light slanted through the tall windows of the Emergency Medical Services headquarters, casting long shadows across gleaming white floors and walls lined with framed certificates and photographs of past heroes. Ivy Snow stood just inside the entrance, clutching an envelope in her calloused hands. The official seal of the department was embossed on the front, an invitation, a chance, a bridge back to a past she had thought permanently closed. It had arrived 2 weeks after the premiere incident, a formal letter offering Ivy a spot in an elite paramedic recertification program specifically designed for those returning to the field after a hiatus. The invitation was both a recognition of her bravery and a genuine opportunity to rebuild a professional life interrupted by circumstance. For days after the letter appeared in her mailbox, Ivy sat silently with it on the worn kitchen table of her small apartment. She traced the raised lettering with uncertain fingers, hesitant to believe the outer world had finally noticed her worth. The voices of doubt flickered within, questions about whether she was ready, whether the years away mattered, if the struggle of balancing motherhood and survival could coexist with renewed ambition. Her son Adam, curled up in the corner playing quietly with a second-hand toy truck, looked up as she spoke her fears aloud one evening. "You saved someone, Mom," he said simply. "You can do it again." That simple truth anchored Ivy's heart. Gratitude from the theater guests, the flood of support echoing through social media, and the outpouring of respect from former colleagues all settled into a quiet determination. Ivy realized the moment had arrived to reclaim her path, on her own terms. She accepted the program, the signature beneath her name a solemn affirmation. The day she walked through the gleaming doors of the training center to begin her refresher courses, Ivy wore a new uniform, a symbol of renewal and resilience. The fabric was crisp, the insignia shining proudly, but it was her steady gaze and purposeful stride that drew silent acknowledgement from her classmates and instructors. Every lecture, every simulation, pumped vigor back into muscles once dulled by time off. Ivy's hands relearned the precise movements, the delicate pressure of bandages, the rhythm of chest compressions, the urgency of triage. Her mind absorbed updates in protocol and technology with vigorous curiosity. During practical drills, she emerged as a natural leader, guiding others with calm assurance. The respect she earned was unspoken but palpable, born not from her past alone but from the strength she displayed in every moment. Outside the classroom, life overflowed with renewed energy. Ivy and Adam shared quiet mornings, breakfasts brimming with hope and laughter, conversations weaving the ordinary threads of mother and son. The weight of years spent hiding her strengths began to lift, replaced by pride and a sense of belonging. The possibility of a future that blended motherhood and meaningful work no longer felt like a distant dream. At the theater, Ivy's role shifted gently but noticeably. She remained the groundskeeper, a position she valued for its stability and charm, but colleagues now looked toward her with a quiet reverence. Invitations to staff events included her name, greetings became warm and genuine, and occasional requests came for her input on safety and emergency preparedness. One afternoon, the theater manager approached her with a proposal to lead in-house emergency response training for staff and guests during events. The offer surprised Ivy but resonated deeply. It was a chance not only to contribute but to own her history with pride. A few months later, Ivy stood before a room of staff members and volunteers, demonstrating CPR techniques and emergency protocols. Her voice, steady and compassionate, echoed with authenticity born of experience. Participants listened raptly, learning not just from instruction but from the quiet strength Ivy embodied. Her son Adam watched from the doorway, eyes shining with admiration for the mother who no longer shied away from the light. Evenings found Ivy settled in her small apartment, worn paramedic textbooks open on the table beside a half-finished dinner. Her heart was full, filled with the tangible evidence that her choices, sacrifices, and resilience had woven a new narrative. No longer invisible in either the theater halls or the wider world, Ivy Snow had reclaimed her story on her own terms. Her journey was not marked by dramatic reveals or sudden changes but by steadfast courage, quiet action, and the unyielding belief that every life holds the power to rise again. By embracing her true self, Ivy had stepped into a future she shaped with strength and grace, ready to face every emergency not as a shadow, but as a woman fully seen, fully capable, and proudly visible.